Speaking about VAT special accounts, there is a meeting ongoing in front of the Parliament this moment, and we have experts from the Reanimation package of reforms here with us today to highlight their vision of the problem. Good morning, everyone. I'm Neskhodovskyi, head of the relevant group of the RPR. We've warned several times about definite shortcomings looming with implementation of this monetary-based system of VAT. And as a result, the shortcomings have persisted, and this specifically concerns those of organization type, because the National Fiscal Service can be said that they failed actually to deliver, to notify taxpayers about the new system, how taxpayers should react, how they should register, how they should act. That is, the Fiscal Service really procrastinated with their clarifications, and as a result, the majority of taxpayers are still not in the know of how the system operates. We would also like to mention it that because of certain anti-competitive actions, like the exchange of taxation invoices, have seen certain monopolization of the market that leads to billions of hryvnias being funneled abroad as payment for licenses for relevant software. I'm not going to go into details of things that are really for professionals, but I would rather say that the immediate consequences have led many taxpayers to a situation when their fiscal invoice for just a couple of thousands of hryvnias need to pay to a special VAT account with the treasury in amount of, well, hundreds of thousands of hryvnias. And the reality is that it really happens. And that led to many entrepreneurs having problems with finding running capital to properly finance this fiscal invoice. Another range of the problems concerns the usage of the so-called electronic documents. As of today, neither the government nor the parliament have been able to provide sufficient solution to the problem of proof of originality of the document. That is, there are problems with using such types of documents in courts, for example. We also have economic problems related to it, because many enterprises and companies are facing the problem of running capital shortages. They really need at least 20% of that more to properly interact with treasury accounts. Because of that, we see a massive bank run, if you want, with funds leaving Ukrainian banks, and this reduces the liquidity of the banking system, and it may mean negative consequences. There are also technical problems involved. We've got numerous reports of the system, the formula used in it, containing intrinsic shortcomings which are related to possibilities of manually handling the system. It surely leads to actually corruption-related risks when the fiscal service may force certain taxpayers establishing specific rules for individual taxpayers, even with negative payers' amounts. With the view of that, the experts of the Reanimation package of reform, together with other experts, have designed a bill 721 One, to eliminate effectively the shortcomings in the governmental system. The first step concerns postponing the implementation of the electronic VAT administration system, and the Cabinet of Ministers will have to provide substantial explanation of changes to the system. Many enterprises have stopped their activities, their business activities. They've forced all their shipments and payments because the new system really negatively affects them. The suggested draft legislation also tries to reduce corruption risks. For more detailed information about the draft legislation, please hear from my colleague Mykhailo Sokolov, who was immediately involved in its elaboration. Good morning. Sorry, I will have to use my laptop not to forget anything, and I will try to put highlights on the draft legislation. Speaking of the piece of legislation, we'll need to say that it is based to a larger extent on the document prepared by the government with the involvement of the Ministry of Finance and the Taxation Committee in the Parliament. The document resulted in a new bill motioned to the Parliament under 2371A registration number. There were certain disagreements throughout its elaboration, but unfortunately neither the Profile Committee in the Parliament nor the Fiscal Service paid enough attention to our suggestions. So what are the key differences between the draft bill that we've motioned? It was motioned by a group of deputies that I represent. Unfortunately, my colleagues were not able to attend this press conference because they're voting in the Parliament at the moment, and they wanted me to relay their position. This draft legislation does not contain any special norms on VAT administration. You know that these norms are highly controversial, and they contributed to this piece of legislation being stalled in the Parliament, leading to the collapse that we are facing since 1st of July. The changes are not about cancelling the special VAT treatment, but rather about establishing a specific comprehensive legislation, not just to cancel something, but also to offer certain compensatory steps. And it has to be elaborated very thoroughly, and it should not be motioned to the Parliament the way it is generally done, with old pieces of legislation being amended with some language. I think this is not the case here, and some serious consideration should be fair. The law also releases taxpayers from responsibility for failure to pay their tax invoices for a certain period, effective since 1st of July. And this is very important because, given the current situation with the VAT administration system, many of taxpayers have not been able to do it because of huge and numerous mistakes with proper registration of these taxation invoices. And this is about people, rather than dodging taxes, being physically unable to use the suggested system, with the formula suggested for it to be intrinsically flawed, allowing for negative values. With the current legislative field, they will be imminently found guilty, and we think this is not a proper way of dealing with it. and we need certain release to be envisaged. Next, our suggested draft legislation suggests prolongation of the test phase of the system until 1st of October. And I'd like also to mention a piece of legislation number 2960 that offers test phase to be prolonged until New Year of 2016, and we do not oppose it. But during our work group deliberations, we suggested that our piece of legislation 2371A should be taken as a basis, but the prolongation period we suggested was until 1st October. We still wait to see the parliamentary reaction to that. But again, let us remember that the Ministry of Finance and the Fiscal Service took 6 months to develop their system, and they were constantly warned by us, by business persons and others about very heavy flaws and shortcomings found in their deliberations. They were told that, say, people in the energy sector may not be able to furnish the fiscal invoices in 1 month because the payments for the services can be collected only in the next coming month, so it is technically impossible. And these two government authorities took 6 months to eliminate some of the mistakes, but they still kept the system deeply flawed. And with a view of the fact that half a year was not enough to brush up the legislation, we really think that it may not be possible to check for all the mistakes in just 1 month, and we'll need a bit more time to improve the system and to make it flawless. It is adventurous to say that it should be done in 1 month with previous faulty attempts to improve the system taking 6 months. Again, we speak about differences between the two types of legislation. Again, our piece of legislation cancels the norm in the governmental draft that imposes responsibility for violation of fiscal service instructions. I'd like to pinpoint it. This is about instruction, setting up the procedure of filing out details, relevant details. It is not a piece of legislation. It is not the national law. It is some internal instruction of the fiscal service. But this is considered as a ground to deny fiscal credit to such business persons. And this, by the way, clearly violates Article 15 of the Constitution of Ukraine. In our draft, we tried to avoid this case. And we've also established that if a taxpayer provides corrections in the details according to the decision taken by the Fiscal Council, he can be restored in his right to tax credit. And I think this is right because it effectively eliminates fiscal terror that really threatens both experts and domestic business transaction field. Another point that we see as a remnant of the Azarov-based system, we also suggest that absence of a business person at its legal address should not be considered as a reason for cancelling one's VAT payer certificate. Before, we had it as a very convenient way of keeping people at bay. And it was a system, long established one, when fiscal officers would say that, okay, we didn't find you at your legal address and you have your certificate cancelled. It is ridiculous how one could connect, say, director's physical presence at the legal address of the company with a certificate, VAT certificate related matters. Another innovation in our draft bill is implementation by the Cabinet of Ministers of electronic cabinet for taxpayers to reflect all the sorts of information that is available today. Also on VAT matters, it would provide clearer vision for everyone and for taxpayers. And for some reason, our governmental authorities still procrastinate with it. Maybe they do not want it to be running. There are some common points between our bills, ours and the previous governmental one. This concerns the need to report to the Parliament about how the system has been implemented and whether all the flaws identified have been eliminated. And in this regard, we will support the authors of the governmental law to have similar provisions included into our bill. Thank you for the presentation. There is a question. Last Thursday, the management of the State Fiscal Service held a presentation of the system of electronic management of VAT accounts. And they said that their piece of legislation 2173A accounts for all the wishes and desires of business communities. It remains questionable if every wish has been granted, but still. So the question is, what does the expert community think about this, given the differences between two pieces of legislation, 2371, 2371A. So how would you estimate the current position of the State Fiscal Service in terms of this electronic system for administration of VAT accounts? You know, it would be hard to answer your question because we need to acknowledge that the suggested governmental bill did provide some solutions to certain problems, and we should be open and sincere in acknowledging that, and some of our suggestions have been accounted for. But still, the overall problem is that there is a set of issues standing, and they need to be resolved in their entirety. A clear set of norms or grounds for VAT certification. This is a decision well worth billions of hryvnias. It is about numerous court cases against Ukrainian manufacturers and exporters, and this is a very serious issue that effectively kills the economy, and it works against exports. And For someone who ships his produce abroad, it is of paramount importance to have VAT returned on time. So we may think of this certification procedure as a very simple and small thing, but effectively it puts the whole economy at risk. There can be also other things that may look unsubstantial to others, but these are things of principle to be resolved. I'd like to add the following. The problem of the draft legislation is corruption risks for the fiscal service remaining there. If we check the VAT invoices and using the single register, this risk remains. They haven't resolved the matter related to
lift or not lift this the tax credit. If this credit invoice is actually supported by the money, how can you actually relieve or leave this right? We have to talk about those who have the problems, not those who receive this tax invoice. And there is some kind of shameful practice. If somebody comes to me, somebody pays, somebody did not pay, let me make those who paid to pay once again. So they you know, the tax administration actually remained with the corruption possibility. You know, one was also raised. I mean, the issue raised very often. Even there are a lot of examples when somebody has a problem with electronic administration. In your opinion, on the other hand, the statistics of a state fiscal service which provides, you know, it's very impressive how many invoices have been registered, etc., etc. In your opinion, speaking about the percent, what's the realistic ratio between those subjects who incur some kind of problems and those subjects who actually start to work in the system, just to find the balance between different positions? Very simple. Why they did not publish the statistics? How many tax invoices they failed to register? We cannot see the dynamics. They actually showed how many invoices they registered last month or for this period. We are shocked by the figure. Actually, we would like to know the figure, how many invoices could have been registered. They do not show this figure. Yes, they show how many invoices have been registered, but they do not provide the statistics. So the question arises, why? Just several figures. You understand what they are talking about as registered. They could compare it with those amounts which could be registered by the Kyivstar company, just one company. It's amazing, you know, somehow it turns out to be that according to import we have more VATs and all those registered accounts, you know, what is has on the accounts. I agree with Ilya. In order to talk about something, we have to compare comparable figure. Of course, in this country, hundreds of millions of invoices have to be registered. This used to be the picture. Yeah, we could talk about the millions, the big figure, but those figures should not be perceived in millions, but in percent. How much percentage is that as compared to what had to be registered? Just small details for us to understand. Let's imagine that, for example, a non-registered are 10% of the tax invoices which had to be registered. Is it much or not? It's too much, because 10% in economics will create a cumulative effect, and in the end of the period in the months, this 10% may increase to 30%. So if you're talking about, yeah, well, hooray, we have raised several millions. Yeah, but you have to follow how many money went to the budget. If you create a system for those who did not actually contributed the monetary support, and now they start to that. You know, by the way, this is not just yet the money of the budget. This is kind of monetary support. So the system is simulated in such a way, or made such a way. When I contributed the support according to my, let's say, commitments or obligations, it does not, they directly go to the budget. This is not still budgetary money, but they got to the budget, you know. It's this kind of trick, you know. Why not follow these several countries? Example, they have electronic VAT. They have a separate, like in Azerbaijan, they have a separate bank dealing with that, and they take that into account, and the remainder goes to the budget. And we say, no, give us everything, we'll report that everything is excellent with us. No, this is not the case. You have to collect only what they have to pay to you, and you try to collect as much as possible, even the money which they do not have to pay to you, and you're killing the economy in this way. Thank you very much. We are out of time. We ran out of time. We do hope that the Verkhovna Rada this week will adopt some of the decisions. We can analyze some of the